Hey everyone, welcome to our video tutorial. My name is Ned. I am a technical evangelist at Caspio. And in today's video, we're going to learn how to take a Caspio application developed using no-code and low-code, and how do we take that application and deploy it into a Webflow CMS. Now, I just want to set the right expectation for the video. The video is not about how to use Webflow. It does assume that you have some prior knowledge of using Webflow, but I will give you just a quick overview of the CMS so that you know how to orient yourself as you develop your website and all of your web pages. So inside Webflow, when you first log in, you're taken to the dashboard page. And on the dashboard page, you're going to be able to set up a new site. Webflow does come with some free templates that you can select, but they also have paid templates that you can choose from if you'd like. This is the one that I selected for the video. All I did was click on the select button, and then back on the dashboard page, you're going to be able to open up the designer. And once you go inside the project, you're going to be able to access the framework. And from here, you're going to be able to select your elements on the web page. And then using the panel here on the right-hand side, you can change the layout, you can change the styling, you can basically virtually do anything within the template using the panel here to the right. To create the pages for your Webflow project, you're going to be able to click on the upper left. And here you can add folders, you can add web pages, and then you can organize your web pages into folders if you want to. One thing that I recommend, if you have pages that are similar looking and you just need to copy that web page, you can click on the gear icon, and then you can make a clone of that web page. And then once you make a copy of that web page, well, now you can slightly modify it to make room for other content that you plan on putting on your website. And then once you select your elements here inside the canvas, you can use the spacing to position that element somewhere else if you'd like, using the slider. You can click inside that element if you want to bring it back to the original position. You can select your text if you'd like, and then down below, you can change the size of that text. You can center it, you can right align, you can left align, you can make that text italic if you'd like. So there are a lot of options. It's very flexible in terms of how you build your website using Webflow. They have a simple and intuitive UI, and you can really get down to a granular level in terms of how you organize your content. Now, I've already published my website. I already have it developed. So let me go ahead and go to my other tab here so that you can see the application that we're going to develop inside Caspio and how we take that application and deploy that into Webflow. Now, the whole premise of this application is for users to be able to sign up, log in, and be able to manage their own expenses on a monthly basis. So here we have a Caspio developed sign-up form. The information that you see here is cached into my browser. The first time you deploy this, it's going to look like that. So this is a Caspio developed form. You can fully customize any form that you develop in Caspio. You can change the field width, you can change the labels, you can do anything that you want in terms of customization. Once you sign up, we can go to the sign-in page. I do want to point out here is that my application that I developed is using a freemium model, meaning anybody can sign up, log in, and use the service. But you could also monetize by having different monthly plans if you wish, if you want to collect revenue and assuming that the end user likes the service that you provide and they continue to use your services. So here, let's go ahead and log in. That's my sample user. Let's log into the application. And once you log in, you're going to be taken to the dashboard page. And all of the objects that you see here on the dashboard page are developed in Caspio and deployed into a Webflow website. Everything from this pie chart where you can see a distribution of all of your expenses, this tabular report where we can see the most recent expenses. We have a tabular report that groups our data so we can expand and collapse these groups if we want to drill in and see more information regarding those categories. In Caspio, I also developed another tabular report that manages all of my recurring payments or expenses. And these are the ones that you don't have to manually add yourself. They're done automatically. Every single month, they're going to get processed. And from here, I can manage each one of them. So let's say I cancel my Netflix account for a few months. I can do an inline edit, and I can deactivate that for a couple of months. And then if I subscribe once again, I can check that box and hit update. I also developed a report that allows me to look at past expenses. So we have a date range filter up here at the top. I'm using a 3D column chart. And what's nice about the charts is you can click inside a legend to show and hide elements if you'd like. if you want to hone in on specific KPIs. Underneath that, we have another tabular report that groups my data by month. So if I wanted to go back and see my previous expenses, I could do that. And last but not least, we have a profile page where my user can log in and update their password or their email. And as you can see, I've disabled the update button because, it's a demo and I don't want somebody to log in and be able to see and be able to update the credentials. Now, people ask me, how long does it take to build something like that in Caspio? Once you get your feet wet and once you learn how to use the Caspio platform, you can develop this in less than 1 day. And in today's video, it's going to take me approximately 30 to 35 minutes to develop all the interfaces, but it's only going to take me that long because I have to explain how we go about developing this in Caspio. Otherwise, if I was building it on my own, it could probably take me less than 1 hour to develop all of these charts and all of these reports. And in the end, if the user wants to log out, they can click on the logout link. Takes me back to the login page. I can go back to the home page, and we're back at the beginning. Now, one thing that I want to mention, when you embed the Caspio interfaces into your Webflow website, one thing that you will need on the Webflow side, when you add your elements to your canvas, you're going to need access to the embed widget. And I believe that's available on almost all of the paid plans in Webflow. And all you're going to be doing is dragging and dropping this embed component into your canvas. And wherever you drop that, it's going to open up this pop-up window where eventually you're going to deploy the Caspio form or Caspio chart and organize that on your web page. Okay, so with that said, let me close that. And let's go into Caspio and let's see how we can develop this entire application. So when you're at the Caspio homepage, you're going to want to log in. I'm going to use one of my accounts that I have. So let's log in. And I will select this account. Now in Caspio, we do provide you with the ability to have multiple accounts. The reason why that's so helpful is that you can have one account for building prototypes and proof of concepts. So treat that as a sandbox account, and then you can have a completely separate account for all of your applications that are in production or live. So I will choose this account that I have. And when you log in, you're taken to the home page. And here you're going to be able to see all of the applications that you have developed as long as you have had your Caspio account. You can see I have quite a few applications developed. And it's very easy to begin developing a new application in Caspio. You click on the button up here at the top, create an app. And you can begin by importing data. So if you have some data offline, let's say in Excel or Access database, you can bring that data into Caspio, and then you can build your applications on top of your data. We're not going to do that today. Today, we're going to build our application as a blank template. Next step is to give your application a name. If you notice here on the left-hand side, all of my applications are in alphabetical order. And if you put a number in front of your application name, it's going to position that application at the very top of your list. And just for the purpose of today's demo, I'm going to add a 1 here, and I'm just going to call this My Expenses. That's going to be the name of my application. Of course, you're going to have your own naming convention. It just depends on how you want to name that application. We're going to hit Finish. And there's my container. From here, what we need to do is open up that application. And in Caspio, the very first place where you want to begin developing your app is always going to be the tables object. Tables are the foundation of any app that you develop. That's where all of your data is going to reside. Now, Caspio works just like a traditional database. If you're familiar with using Access, if you understand one-to-one relationships, one-to-many and many-to-many, you're going to feel right at home using Caspio. Because the first thing that we need to do is create the tables that are going to store all of our fields, all of our data types, and all of our data. The very first table I'm going to create is a very simple lookup table that's going to contain all of our expense categories. So it's a very small table. We're just going to call this expense, or let's call this category ID. And for the data type, I'm just going to use an auto number data type to assign a unique ID to every single one of my category values that I have inside this table. Now, every table that you develop in a database design should have an ID field at the very top. In a database application, it's commonly referred to as the primary key, and it is used to uniquely identify each row inside a table. So always remember to add an ID at the very top of the list for every single table that you create. And then we're going to have our category. We're going to save this table. Let's give it a name. We're going to call this ME for my expenses, TBL, and categories. So there's my very first database table. I'm going to open it now, and I'm just going to list down a few categories here. Let's have mortgage. Let's have entertainment. Let's have bills and utilities. Let's actually borrow some from my live example that I have so that you can see how I've done that. So let me go back and log in very quickly. Let's add an expense up here. And you can see all the categories that I had. So we have shopping, we have travel, we have auto. Okay, so let's add a few of these. So let's go back to my Caspio account. Let's do shopping. Let's do auto. Let's do groceries. Okay, and then you can, let me remove that. And then you can add other categories if you wish at a later time. I'm going to keep these categories, but come back to this table if you have additional ones, and you can just list them down inside this table. Now, for the second table that I'm going to create is a user table, because I want people to sign up on my website so that we can store their information, and then later on they can log in. So if you look at my live example here, let's log out. Let's go to the sign up form. I want to collect this information from the people that are signing up on my website. So let's go back, create that table. So you're going to click on the button up here. And then remember, always add the ID field at the very top. So we're going to call this user ID. And for my data type, I'm going to choose random ID to randomly assign a unique ID to every single user that signs up on my website. Let's have first name, last name. Actually, let's keep everything uniform here. So I'm just going to remove the underscore. We want their email address. We want their password field. And let's have date registered. And also account status. The reason why I want the account status field is I want to be able to control who's going to be able to log into my application and who's not going to be able to log into my application if I don't want them to log in anymore, right? So we need to have some sort of manager level access to either make users active or inactive using a simple checkbox method. So let's just imagine this user is no longer paying a monthly fee. I want to deactivate their account so they can no longer log in. For my email field, I want to make this a unique field as well, because you're never going to have two different users with the same email. Emails are always unique. And then for my password field, we're going to turn this into a password data type. So it encrypts the password on the table level. And then date registered, we have a data type here called timestamp so that we can automatically stamp the date and time of the person that signed up. Now, it is completely up to you what fields you wish to include in your user table. You can add additional fields if you'd like. If you want to collect their phone number, if you want to collect their address, completely up to you. I'm just going to keep it simple. Have these fields here. Let's save the table and let's give it a name, ME, TBL, users. Now inside this table, it's an empty table, right? There's no data inside it, but when I build my registration form later on, we're going to populate the table with some actual data. For my third table that we're going to set up, it's going to be the table, the main table as I would refer to it, is the one that's going to store all of the expenses. So what information do we need inside this table? So again, remember, we always need the ID field at the top. So we're going to call this expense ID. Again, I'm going to use a random ID for that. It's going to be a unique field. We also want to collect the user ID field. The reason why we need the user ID field inside this table is we need to be able to track in a one-to-many relationship which user is actually submitting the expense. Okay, so that's important because it's a relational database. We need to know when the user logs in and they submit the expense, we want to stamp their ID in the expenses table so that we can relate and associate the expense back to the end user. All right, for my next field, we want the name of the expense. Let's also have category so that we can select that via a dropdown. You'll see how we connect the dropdown later on to this field. Let's have cost and let's have date. So for date, let's use a date and time data type. For cost, I think we can use currency for that. And those are really all the fields that we're going to need inside this table. So let's save it. And let's give it a name, ME for my expenses, TBL, and we're going to call this table expenses. All right, so we're going to need one more table. So this entire application is going to have a total of 4 tables. So let's click on Create Table. And for this table, we're going to have one that's going to store all of the recurring expenses. The reason why we want to do that is later on when we create the task, you're going to be able to see how every single month, if we hit the value for the specific day of the month, we're going to be able to copy the information from the expense table to our recurring table automatically. So that's going to be automated completely behind the scenes. The end user doesn't have to do anything manually. So we need to be able to set that up to store these recurring expenses to our recurring table. And believe it or not, it's going to have almost the same exact field. So we need the expense ID. So let's just have that be a random ID. We also want to be able to have user ID because we need to be able to track those recurring expenses for a specific user. Let's have name. Let's have category. So these are almost identical fields to the table that we just created. We have cost. We have recurring. Now, this is the only one that's going to be different. And we have the date field. The date field is going to be date and time. The recurring is going to be a checkbox. Cost is going to be currency. And the rest of these are going to remain the same. The reason why we have the recurring checkbox is because we want to be able to flag that in the table, the recurring table, what's going to be recurring and what's not going to be recurring, right? So we want to make it active or inactive. Remember in the live example when we looked at Netflix and I unchecked the box, we want to be able to select that to make sure that if that recurring expense is going to continue being posted on a monthly basis or not. So let's save the table. Let's give it a name, ME, TBL, recurring expenses. And those are going to be the final tables for this application. Now, the next step, when I build my applications in Caspio, the best practice, once you're done building all of your tables, is to go to relationships. And now we want to be able to wire all of the tables using the primary key and the foreign key. So it's a relational database. Again, if you've used Access in the past, you're going to feel right at home using Caspio. We're going to include all of our tables by checking the box here. And then it's very simple. You can move these tables however you want. It's completely up to you, whatever preference you have. You can expand and collapse the tables if you want to be able to see all of your fields, the table name. My personal preference, a lot of people like to work top to bottom in terms of their schema. I like to work left to right. That's just my own preference. So I'm going to move my user table here. And all I need to do is just connect all of my tables. So we know that one user can have many expenses. So we connect this line to the user ID field. You're going to get this pop-up. And Caspio is smart enough to know and recognize what the relationship type is. You can see it's going to be a one-to-many. Now, I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but you have some options here to enforce referential integrity, to use some values on the data pages and interfaces later on. You guys can explore these features in Caspio. I'm just going to hit create, and you're going to be able to see how Caspio connected that for us. So it's one user can be linked to many expenses. Same thing here. We're going to just connect the line over here to the other table. Click on create, and this table here can just remain the way it is. If you'd like, you can also connect the category field back to your recurring table if you want to. It's not going to have a relationship. And then you can also connect that to the other table as well. And you're going to be able to see an indeterminate relationship here. So you can click on create. Because this category eventually is going to be listed as a dropdown. So when you submit the form, you're going to be able to store that category inside the expenses table. Okay, so a very simple relationship design, a database design. Nothing fancy is happening here, but eventually, if you're building a project that has many tables, and I've seen applications, I've built applications that have 15, 20, 30 tables, and once you connect all of these lines back and forth, it could start to look like a giant spider web. Okay, and that is the expected behavior. It's inevitable, right? Because eventually you're going to run out of space. You're going to have these lines crisscrossing to other tables. So if you have a database background, if you built these applications before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's save our layout now. Okay, and the next step is to go over here to views. And the views are going to allow us to filter the active users against the inactive users. And we want the view to filter active users because we want to give access to those people into our application. So we create the view. Let's call this ME filter active users. So you're going to move the user table to the right. Okay, very simple. You're going to hit next. And then in the criteria tab, we have these drag and drop elements that you can include inside a canvas here. So if I only want to filter out active users, you're going to select the field element. You're going to select account status, and you want that to be checked. So if that condition is valid, if that condition is true, if the checkbox is checked in my user table, the view will now filter out only active users. Okay, I don't have any users in my table to show you that, but eventually you'll see later on when we populate the table with some users how we actually go about filtering that data. All right, let's continue. So let's build our authentication next. The authentication is that login screen that you see on the website, right? So that's what's going to give permission for people to log into the application. So we need to set up our authentication. And for my data source, we're going to use the view that's filtering our active users, the one that we just set up. So you can use Express if you want a quick login screen where you set up your credentials here, email and password. But I always like to use custom because you get so many more customization options that you can enable on the login screen. Next thing you need to select is how do we validate the person that's logging into our application. So if you select the top radio button, that means you're going to use the view, and anybody inside that view is going to have access to log in. If you choose the second radio button, now the user can log in with their social media account. So they can log in with Twitter, they can log in with Gmail or OpenID. The third radio button is a combination of both. And I'm sure many of us can relate to this. If you go to a website, they give you the ability to sign up directly with them with their registration form, or you can quickly log in if you want to bypass that, you can log in with your Gmail account, your Twitter account, or OpenID. And finally, we have SAML for single sign-on. So if the organization has an IDP like Okta, Active Directory, and your employees or users already have their credentials stored inside that IDP, well, you can automatically log into a Caspio applications with those existing credentials. You don't need to store your passwords inside the Caspio table. Today, we're going to use the Caspio data source. We have our two login fields, email and password. I'm just going to say for label, I'm going to rename that to email. It's a little bit more clear. And the reason why I prefer custom over Express is because we can add additional elements to our login screen, which is very helpful. So for example, I can add an HTML block at the very top, and above my email field, I could say something like this, account login. I can highlight my text, I can make it bold, and you can have other options here on how to modify the look and feel of that text. If you're a bit more tech savvy, you can go to the source, and here you can add HTML, custom CSS to further manipulate and modify your heading. In addition to that, you can expand these advanced settings. The advanced settings are very helpful because here, when a user logs out of the application, you can specify where you want that user to go when they click on the logout link. So for example, in my live example here, I want them to go to the sign-in page when they log out. So I will copy this link at the top. Okay, I'm going to copy that URL. I'll go back to Caspio and I will just paste that link. You can also keep the URL relative if you wish, where it's just a sign-in page. Just make sure you check the box relative so they remain on the same path. Let's save it. Timeout and redirection. So we're going to click on change here as well. So I want the users to be logged out of the application. Let's say if they're absent from the application for about 2 hours. For security, I want to log them out automatically and again, send them back to the login page. And one more thing that's very important here is enable cross-application login. So you want to make sure this checkbox is checked. Okay. So when you're done, all you need to do here is click on create. Let's give it a name. We're going to call this ME for my expenses, and we're going to call this user authentication. And the final object that I'm going to create is a task before we learn how to build all the forms, all the reports, and all the charts, because in Caspio, that's really the fun part, to build all those interfaces. But I need to create a task. And what the task is going to do is when we add something to the recurring table, right? So remember on the live example, let's go ahead and log in. I just want you guys to visualize that. When you add something to this report using inline insert, and I add that item as a recurring expense, what I want the application to do is to check for the date that I added that expense. So let's just say we add something for the May 20th. I want to begin recurring at May 20th. Okay, I add a new expense here. What's going to happen on June 20th, we're going to check for that value 20, and we want to be able to add that into our expenses table, which is our main table. Okay, so these are the recurring ones, and then when July 20th hits, which is the following month, we are checking for that value 20, and if that condition equals true in the task, we're going to copy over from the recurring table into our main expenses table. So that's really what we want to be able to do here. So let me go back to my account. Let's create a new task, and you can run the task on demand if you want to run that task right away, or you can set up a scheduled task, which is what I'm going to do. And I want to run that task daily. Let's start the task today. That's fine. Today is May 18th. Let's go ahead and run that task at midnight, which is also okay. And let's run it every day. Okay, so I want to run this task daily. So now let's configure the task. We're going to hit apply. What we need to do is use the action element, and we need to be able to insert the data inside the expenses table. So that's our main table, right? But we want to be able to insert the data, select from the recurring expenses table, right? Because when we add something to the recurring expenses table, when we create the condition, which we're going to do right now, we want to take that recurring expense and again, add it to our main expenses table, because that's the main table that's going to store all the expenses. And now let's use the condition. Okay, so you can do conditional statements here in Caspio as well, where if something happens, I want something else to happen. And we're going to have two different conditions here. So let's use the AND logic. So we're going to use AND. So let's insert that. Okay, and the first condition is we want to make sure that the recurring checkbox is checked. Okay, so we're going to select the field recurring, and we want that to be true. So we're going to remove this. And for the true, we want to be able to use logic true, right? So that's the first condition. That's the easy one. Okay, so if the recurring in the recurring table is checked, once that is looked at inside a task, we're going to take that expense and move it over to the expenses table. Now, the second condition is a little bit more complex. Once again, we're going to go to logic here, and we want to be able to now grab the day from the date. So we are doing a comparison here. We're going to use this one. Okay, so we need something to equal to something else. So here under date, we want to be able to get the day. So we're going to include this element in the beginning, and we need the field. So in the field date, we want to be able to get the day, right? So when you add the recurring expense into a table, you're actually storing the date inside that table, but we're only interested in getting the day. Remember what I said. If you start the recurring expense on May 20th, we want to be able to get that number 20 in June, in July, in August, in every other month in order to copy that recurring expense back to our expenses table automatically. But we want that to equal to today's date to get the day once again. So we need one more. Under date, we want to be able to compare. And what you're comparing now is the timestamp. So we're going to go back to the date. We want the timestamp. Okay, so you can leave that the way it is. And again, you want to get the day. So it's checking against today's date. Basically, you're getting the day of today's date. That's what the task is doing. And if it equals 20 to 20 or 21 to 21, depending on when you start that recurring expense, it's always going to copy that information into your expense table. And finally, what you need to do is just map out the fields. So we're going to add all of our fields from the expenses table. And you want to map that back to the recurring table. So you're going to use the data field, user ID to user ID. Once again, data field, and you're going to copy over the name. And there's a little trick here that you can do. You don't have to go back to data every single time. You can right click and duplicate and just snap that in place. Category to category, duplicate, cost to cost. And for the final one here for the date, you want to make sure you copy today's date into your expenses table. So we're going to grab the time zone once again, timestamp, and leave that the way it is. Okay, so you're going to copy over today's date back to the expenses table. And this is the task that's going to run in the background. It's going to run every single day. You're checking for two conditions, and if both of those conditions are true, you're going to copy the information from the expenses table back to from the recurring expenses table back to your expenses table, which is what we set up here. This is just one way of how you can use the task to automate procedures in the background, and so the end user doesn't have to do anything manually, either via the application or here in the back end, which is only accessible, obviously, to the developer of the application. So let's save it. Let's give it a name. I'm going to call this ME for my expenses, and we can just call this perhaps something arbitrary here. Let's say copy recurring payments to expense table. It's a little bit long, but at least it's clear. We know exactly what the task is going to be doing. Let's save and enable. And now that we set it, we can forget it. It's always going to run in the background. From here on out, what we can do is finally move on to building all of the interfaces. That's always the fun part in Caspio. And to do that, you're going to go to Data Pages, and you're going to select Create New Data Page here. This is going to launch Caspio's point-and-click data page wizard to develop all the forms, all the reports, calendars, charts, and even HTML data pages. Don't be confused by this term. Eventually, your application, what it is a collection of these data pages. I like to call them widgets or interfaces, but once you build each one of these objects for your project, you're going to be able to eventually embed that back into Webflow. So let's begin by building the registration form. We're going to select this option. We're going to hit Next. For my table, which is my data source, I need to use the user's table, because when somebody signs up on my website, I need that information to go back to my user table. Okay, makes sense? Let's give this data page a name. Let's call this registration form, something simple. You can apply a specific style to your application if you'd like. Styles are all about the look and feel and the aesthetics of your form or your chart or your report. We give you some preloaded styles that you can choose from this list, or you can fully customize your own style, which is very helpful if you want to be able to change the color of the labels, color of the fields, color of the buttons. We even give you access to the CSS. So if you're a bit more tech savvy, you can go directly into CSS. You can add your own classes. You can add your own properties, your own values to fully configure and supersede our own style that we have inside Caspio. Now for my project, I'm just going to use gray, something simple. As for the localization, you can see we give you some preloaded localizations as well to change the currency, to change the date format, to even change the language of the form. I'm going to stick with English and continue. Now it's asking me, what fields do you wish to use in the web form? I need all of my fields in the web form, so let's move them all to the right. Hit Next. Once you reach the Properties section, you can select your fields here on the left-hand side, and you can make changes using the Form element dropdown if you want to change this specific field to a different form element. And you can see we give you a lot of options on how you can modify each one of your fields. If you'd like to see what the form looks like at any point, you can click on the Preview button, and that's going to show you what the form looks like. Okay, very simple. Let me close the Preview tab. Let me come back to the Data Page Builder. And one thing that you want to do here is for account status, by default, it's going to be set up as a checkbox. You want to make sure that field is hidden, and now it's up to you if you want to onload receive that checkbox. And what that means basically is, do you want to give access to the user into your application right away if you check this box? Or do you want to review their information before they log in, and then you manually have to go to the table, check the box, and now the user is going to be able to log in? So it's up to you. I think we want to give them access immediately so they can log in and see the application. Okay, and let's see what other options we have here. Maybe for the label, we can add a space there. Let's make that field required. Last name, add a space, make that field required. Email is automatically required. And then we have the password field, which you also have some options here. If you'd like to show the password strength, if you'd like to have a minimum strength required for more secure login, But again, it's completely up to you. Let's hit next. And now you can customize the confirmation message. So when they sign up for the account, so here on my live example, let's log out once again. Let's go to the sign up page. Once they hit submit, you can configure what they're going to be able to see after they sign up for the account. Okay. Now, you don't have to have a confirmation message. You can also have a different destination if you'd like. You can have them go to a new page of your website once they register. Completely up to you. I'm just going to have a confirmation message. And I'm just going to leave it as a default. I don't really need to customize that at this point. Let's hit finish. And there's my registration form. My very first form, we built that in less than a minute. And now if you're ready to put this in your Webflow website, you can hit deploy, enable deployment status. And what you're going to do is grab this embed code. This is the most popular deployment method. You're going to copy the little bit of code. You can close the window at this point. Go back to your Webflow website. And now let's go to our sign up page, which I already created in advance. You're going to click inside. So basically what I already did in advance, ahead of time, I have already included all of my embed widgets or components inside my canvas. So this is the embed component. So when I click on it, it has my existing data page that I used before. Let's remove the one that we used before in my live example. And let's paste the one that we just copied, which is going to have a gray style. Let's save and close. Let's publish. And it's just going to take a few seconds for Webflow to publish my website. Okay, publish successfully. Watch what happens now when I refresh my web page. Now we have that gray form. Okay, and it was that easy. Copy, paste, embed. And now if I don't like the way the form looks, I can change the style. I can use a different style, or I can go to the Styles tab and fully configure the look and feel of my form as much as I want to. And now let's see how we can actually have a first registered member. So let's fill out this form. We're going to say John Doe. Let's just say John Doe at test.com. Password can be test123. Test123. Let's hit register or submit. There's my confirmation message. Let's go to our table now of users, and we should be able to now see that very first registered member inside a table. And that's how simple it is. Okay, so the data pages are what your end user is going to be accessing via Webflow, via your website. But in the backend, as a Caspio application developer, you're going to be able to see all the information stored inside the backend. Okay, so let's build our second data page. Now, the second data page is a little bit tricky, and the reason why is because what's going to happen when the user logs in, okay, when the user logs in, we want to redirect them to a specific URL of our website. Okay, it's not complicated, so let's see how we can do that. So let's set up our second data page, and for the second data page, we're going to use an HTML data page. Let's call this login screen. For my style, again, I'm just going to stick with the gray style that I have. Keep everything uniform and cohesive. Let's do English localization. And now we need to restrict the access to the authentication that we developed from this object. So we select the authentication. It's the only one that we have. Keep in mind that in Caspio, the benefit of Caspio is that you can have unlimited application users. Okay, there's no limit. So even if you have 10,000 users, 100,000 users, they're all going to be able to log in and use whatever service you provide. A lot of other no-code, low-code platforms out there have a per-user model. Caspio has unlimited. Okay, you can also set up different user levels in your application. So let's say you're building a CRM and you want to be able to have admin level access, management, supervisor, employee. You can have different tiers, and when they log in, they're going to have access to either different information or be able to edit certain information, while other user roles will not be able to have that capability. Let's continue. And what you need to do in this screen is create a very simple script to redirect the user to a specific web page of your website. Now, I like to disable the HTML editor and just write a simple line of script here, window.location, okay, and then equal sign, and then in parentheses, we're going to paste the URL where we want the user to go to when they log in. So take a look at my live example here. When I log in, as Molly, who is my actual user, because I haven't set up my new login screen yet. I'm going to log in as Molly. And I want them to be redirected to this page called Dashboard, which I've set up in advance inside Webflow. So if I go back to Webflow, you're going to be able to see all of my pages. And I have a folder that contains my page called Dashboard. So I already did this in advance. So this page already exists inside Webflow. Okay? And I want the user to go to this page when they log in. So back in Caspio, we're going to just say, paste that like that. We're going to close the quotes, semicolon, and just write our closing script tag. Okay, so when you're finished, you're going to hit the button here to finish. And here's my second data page. And the whole purpose of that data page is to simply redirect the user when they log in. That's it. So it functions as a bridge to send the user from one web page to another web page of my website when they log in. So let's hit deploy. Let's enable. Copy the code back to Webflow, and you're going to see how easy this is. We're going to go to the page called Sign In. And this is my previously used data page that I copied. I'm going to remove that one and paste a new one that I just developed inside Caspio. Save and close, republish. Let's go back to my live example. Let's log out. And now there's my login screen. And I can no longer log in as Molly because Molly belongs to my actual live example that I built in advance. Now I would have to log in as John Doe. Okay, but I cannot log in as John Doe just yet because when I log in, the data pages that are on the dashboard page are actually specific for my other application that I developed in the past. So now I have to build my new data pages for the dashboard page. What's really cool is now you can navigate back and forth, back to the sign up page, back to the sign in page, and eventually in a few minutes, you're going to be able to see how we log in as John Doe. But for now, let's go back to Caspio and let's build the rest of our data pages. We are going to build the form that allows me to submit my expenses. So let's create the data page. Submission form, hit next, based off of the expenses table. Let's call this add expense. Again, I'll select my gray style. Localization is English. Restrict access, very important. You have to apply your authentication. Hit next. Let's include all of our fields in the submission form. Hit next. And one setup that you have to make sure you enable for the user ID field. Now that I'm logged in as John Doe, I'm going to make this field hidden because the user doesn't need to see that field. We're going to make that field hidden. And then upon submission, I want to be able to stamp that authenticated user's ID into my expenses table automatically, all behind the scenes, right? So the field is going to be hidden. It's going to populate my ID as John Doe into that field. And upon submission, we're basically storing the user ID into the expenses table. And that's how we're able to associate the expense back to the user that's logged in. Then we have our name field. So let's make that field required. We have the category field. We're going to make that field required, obviously. And then instead of text field, we're going to create that to be a dropdown. We have source custom values. We're going to use both lookup table and custom values. The reason why is because under custom values, I want to say select category. Okay, make sure you delete the value. You don't want the end user to store this in the table. So this is going to have a null value or blank. And then for lookup table, remember, we created a lookup table that contains all of our categories, right? So very simple. We're going to connect that to our dropdown, and we're going to leave it as is. The cost is going to be a text field. Let's make sure that's required. And for the date field, why don't we turn that into a timestamp? So upon submission, well, let me see what I did in my live. Well, I can't actually look at my live example anymore because I cannot log in because I'm using a new login screen. So I can't log in as Molly anymore. But I'm trying to remember if I used a timestamp or if I used a manual user can just select the date themselves. Okay, so let's have it be manual because imagine if you had an expense and you didn't add it that same day, you added it the following day, we should be able to manually have a calendar pop up to select the date ourselves as the user. So that I think that makes sense. And then finally here on the page, you can have a confirmation message if you'd like. I'm actually going to have the user be redirected to the dashboard page upon submission. So we're going to have go to a new page. I'm actually going to have the user be redirected back to my dashboard page. So when they submit the expense form, upon submission, I want to be able to see that submission immediately on the dashboard view. So in Webflow, what you can do is go back to your pages, click on the gear icon, and you can just copy the link that's over here. So let's copy that text. Go back to Caspio and just paste that here. Okay. We're going to hit finish. Oh, it has to make sure you add HTTPS. Click on finish. And that's done. So there's my third data page. Very simple, right? And you're going to be able to see how I deploy that now back to Webflow. So we hit deploy. We grab our embed code, copy it back into Webflow. Let's find a page that has add expense. Here it is. And click inside that. Remove the previous one, paste a new one, save, close, and always remember to publish to Webflow. Okay, so then the idea here is when you go back to the dashboard page, I added this button called Add Expense, and when you click on that button, the user is redirected to this page called Add Expense, where I've now just deployed my form. And you're going to be able to see once we log in how all of that comes together. So now on the dashboard page, let's build our chart, let's build our tabular report, and let's build an additional tabular report that breaks down all the expenses by category, and then we're going to log in as John Doe. So let's come back here to data pages, let's build our pie chart. So go down to charts, select the pie chart, hit next. Based off of the expenses table, let's give it a name, expenses by category. I'm going to use the gray style once again. And same localization of English, and make sure you restrict access and continue. Now, I don't need to build a search form to filter my chart. I just want to be able to see the data on the chart. So let's select filter data based on predefined. What's very important here, however, is to enable record level security. When I log in as John Doe, I only want to be able to see my own data based on my own unique user ID. Very important, right? Because if you have multiple users that are registered and they log in, they should be able to see their own chart. Yeah, I don't need to see data for some other user that's not related to me in any way. We're going to hit next. Do we want to filter our data on the chart? Yes. I only want to be able to see the data for the current month. So we include the date field to the right. That's our filtering field. We're going to hit next. And now what we want to select here is just for the current month. So that's my filter on the chart. Right on the dashboard page, the way I imagine this application to work is when I log in as a user, I just want to focus on this month on the dashboard, right? What am I spending my money on? When the next month rolls over, then I want to be able to see the data for that month, right? I don't need to be able to see the data for all the months in aggregate, just that current month. Let's continue. And now let's set up the chart. Okay, very simple. You can add your title. You can add your subtitle of the chart if you'd like to have that positioned above the chart. For my category, I'm going to include the category field, right? Because I'm trying to show the distribution of all the categories on the pie chart. And for the value, you can have the breakdown show as percentage, if you like, so you can see what you're spending your money on percentage-wise. But I'm just going to show the value. And for the value label, I like to always do both data type and the label, right? We're going to hit both. For the value field, I want to include cost, and I want to do this sum, right? Because I need to be able to see how much money am I spending for each per category. And for formatting, let's edit here as well and enable custom, and we're going to use currency. And it's up to you if you want to show digits after the decimal. I'm just going to round everything up. I'm going to have 0 digits after the decimal. Hit OK, right? And that's all we have to do. That's our chart. And you're going to see what it looks like in just a moment. Let's hit finish. Okay, let's deploy the chart. Grab our embed code, copy it back into Webflow. And here it is. I want to position my chart in the upper left. We're going to click inside that, copy the whole thing, paste, save, and close. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to log in as John Doe, but I have to replace these previously used embed codes. So I'm going to just double click and remove them. Save and close, double click, remove it, save and close. So that at least when I log in, I'm going to be able to see the chart. So let's publish. Let's go back to our website and let's log in as John Doe. So John Doe at test.com, password was test123. So if all goes well, I should be redirected to my dashboard page now, where I see the chart. Now the chart is going to be empty. It's a blank chart because there's no data inside my expenses table just yet. However, remember when I click on the button up here, it's going to take me to my expenses form. Okay, so now I can add my expense. So let's just say we said groceries, and we'll say sprouts cost. Let's say we spent $2.99 and the date of that expense was today. Upon submission, remember we have a redirect to take me back to the dashboard page. So when I hit submit, okay, so that was bound to happen. Sometimes we run into some issues that we need to fix. So that's a good example of how you need to fix something now in order to properly be redirected to the correct page. So let me go back to my submission form, and I know where the mistake is. I need to go back to my data pages. I need to edit my expense form, and I'm happy this happened so that you can see how we go back to the data page and make the changes. So we're going to go back to the destination and messaging, but this is clearly incorrect. I think what I need to do is just maybe add the www to take me back to that page. So let's take a look. I'm going to try that one more time. We're going to hit finish. Let's refresh the form. And hopefully this works correctly. So let's add another expense. I'm going to use the category maybe auto, car payment, cost $4.99. This would obviously this is going to be a recurring payment, but I'm just adding it for now, just so I can test my redirection. Okay. So again, I'm having the same issue. Let's close that. Let's go back to my form. The data is still being submitted, by the way. So far, we have 2 records submitted back to our expenses table. But my redirection is not working for some reason. So let me go back to my submission form, edit one more time. Hopefully, I can quickly investigate and find what the problem is. It should just be https://expensereports.webflow.io portal and then just dashboard. I believe that should be correct. So trying to figure out why it's not doing that. Let me hit finish one more time. I think that's what I had before. Let me reload this and let me submit the form one more time. So maybe mortgage, 3,500. Sorry, house payment. We'll just say 3,500, and date can be also maybe today. And upon submission, do I have a space in my URL? Is it really that simple? Let me just go back to my form. If that's really what's causing the issue, yes. So as you can see, when it comes to development, sometimes the smallest issue can throw everything off. And I'm really happy that this took place so that we can go back and forth and you guys can see how a simple little mistake when it comes to coding, which really is not coding, I was just supposed to copy and paste, can just throw the whole thing off. Okay, and you have to kind of troubleshoot, investigate, and find out what it is. And really, it was as simple as this little space after my backslash. And if you guys are watching this video, if you noticed that before I did, you're probably scratching your head and saying to yourself, it's just that space right there. Okay, well, there it is. We fixed it. We're going to hit finish. Let's go back to our submission form, and I'm going to just knock on wood 3 times here on my end that it goes well. We are going to select entertainment. Let's do HBO Max, cost $19.99, date today, and we have success. We have added 4 different expenses, and we can see it nicely positioned here on our pie chart. And this is actually also available inside the expenses table inside Caspio, right? Because we submitted that data via the form. In the backend, in the table now, if you go to your expenses table, you're going to be able to see those submissions because that's where all of your data is always going to reside. All right, let's continue developing. Back to data pages. The next one that we're going to create is a tabular report that shows me all of my recent expenses. So let's build a data page. Let's go with the tabular report now. I want to be able to see my data in rows and columns. However, you can also do gallery layout if you're building a directory. You can do list if you're doing something like real estate properties. You can do a pivot table if you'd like. I'll do a tabular report, hit next, based off of my expenses table. And let's call this current expenses, tabular report, maybe something like that. Same style, gray, same localization of English, and make sure you restrict access and continue. Do we want the capability to search? You could have a search form if you'd like to filter your expenses, but again, I'm just going to do a predefined. restrict access to my end user, very important to enable record level security. We're going to hit next. And again, just like the pie chart that we did, we want to include the date field and only show me the expenses for the current month. That's my filter. The tabular report really just needs to show that information. We're going to hit next. Now, what information do we want to display on the tabular report? Well, let's have the name, let's have the category, the cost, and the date. We don't need to include the ID fields in my report. That's irrelevant to what the user needs to see. We're going to hit next. I don't want the end user to have the capability to edit my data on that tabular report. That really just needs to be read-only. But if he or she wants to be able to edit the information, we can include that in a completely different report. All right, so we have name, we have category, we have cost, we have date. We're going to insert what we call totals and aggregation. And I want to be able to see the total, how much money I'm spending for that current month. So we include the cost field to the right. My function is already enabled as sum. You can inject your own custom formula if you'd like, completely up to you. For my cost field, it's already set up as a currency, so that's okay. Don't need to change that because the field in my table, the data type, is currency. And then here we can format this if we'd like for the total to also be in currency, and I'm just going to round everything up. No need for digits after the decimal. Let's continue. Let's show the most recent expense first. So we're going to sort the data, okay, in that specific order to show me the most recent expense at the top and all the other ones after that. I only want to display 7 records per page. Okay, and we're going to keep it at 7 in the advanced tab here. We only want to show 7 entries because I don't need to see too many on the dashboard. I can actually drill in at a different report to see all of my expenses, which if you guys recall in the live example, we were able to do that under reports, where we can expand all the expenses for each given month. But on the dashboard, really it's just supposed to be quick look into your expenses. You don't need to see everything on the dashboard at that point. Okay, let's continue. And do we need a details page? For the dashboard, no need for a details page. Let's disable it and click finish. And let's go ahead and deploy this. We're going to hit deploy, grab our embed code, same as before. And hopefully you can see how easy it is to use Caspio. There's no coding here. Let's click inside it. Let's paste our embed code, save and close, publish. And let's check it out. Okay, back to our dashboard. All we need to do is refresh, and we should be able to see that now in the upper right corner. And that's the data that's showing from that table. Now I have it up to 7. Okay, that's the max that I'm showing on the dashboard page. So if I went back to add an expense, and let's say I added something for, I don't know, maybe shopping, new shoes. We're going to say cost maybe $150. We pay for those shoes yesterday. We hit submit, but it's still in the current month, right? And you're going to be able to see that information. Okay, now I need to figure out why the new shoes are not showing up at the very top, because that was the most recent. Oh no, because we submitted that for the yesterday's date. That's why it's on the 17th. So that is correct actually, right? Now, if I submitted something for today, that would obviously be at the very top. So let's just do that really quickly so that we can verify. Let's do bills and utilities. We'll just do PG&E. Cost, depending on where you live or if you have solar or not. Let's just say you paid $149. And that will say for today's date. Hit submit, and that should be at the very top now. Okay, so the reason why it's not showing up at the top is because I made a mistake of just using the date field in the table. If I'd used date and time, then we will be able to stamp the time too. We're not going to edit that field to change that at this point. But in the table, you just have to set it up as a date and time to actually store the time in the table as well so that you can sort based on time. Right now, I'm only sorting based on date. That's why it's not putting PG&E at the very top. Okay, so that's my mistake on my end, but because we already used up a lot of time building this out, we're not going to go back and fix that. Okay, the next data page that we're going to create is another tabular report down here that's going to group our data based on the category. So let's build that very quickly. New data page. Again, we're going to use a tabular format. We're going to hit next based on the expenses table. Let's call this grouped expenses by category. I'm going to use the same style, which is gray, same localization of English, restrict access, and continue. We're not going to search the data. We're going to filter our data. And again, we need to enable record level security. Very important. We're going to hit next. Here, we want to be able to filter our data. Again, we're going to use the current month because that's going to be on the dashboard. It just needs to show me the data for the current month. We're going to set that as current month and continue. Let's display the name. Let's display the category field, name, cost, and date. Do we want the ability to edit data? No, let's keep everything as read only. Let's continue. And now for category, you can enable data grouping, and let's have it be a collapsible group, and let's have that be collapsed by default. So the end user has to manually expand that group in order to see all the expenses for that category. So we're going to have a collapse by default. We're going to have our name field, cost, that's all good, and then the date field. And then let's include the totals and aggregation. Once again, let's grab our cost field. Let's do the sum, and let's make sure the formatting is set up correctly. So we're going to do currency, no digits after the decimal, click OK, hit next. And we don't need to change any sorting options here. Let's display 25 records per page. Let's continue. No need for a details page. Click finish, and we're done with that report. So let's deploy it. Grab our embed code, copy it, back into Webflow. Let's click inside that HTML component or that embed component, paste, save and close, and publish. And hopefully you guys can see how easy this is. We can literally create these data pages in less than a minute. Once you get the hang of the data page wizard and how to point and click and select your options, you can quickly just grab the embed code, go back to your Webflow account, paste it, and now it's available live for the end users to be able to see. So let's take a look. There we go. We have our categories. We can expand a category to see the expense under bills, entertainment, groceries, and all the other categories that you might have. And that's the information that's going to reside on our dashboard page. You can, of course, you can include other data pages here as well. You can have as many data pages as you want on the dashboard page, depending on what information you want the end user to see. Next page that we're going to work on is recurring. So let's do that next. We're going to go back to data pages. Create new data page. Okay, we're going to select the tabular report. We're going to hit next. That's going to be based on the recurring expenses table, right? So we need to be able to store the recurring expenses when we do an inline insert from the top of the report, which you'll see in just a moment. So let's call this recurring expenses report. Same style, same localization, restrict access. Let's make sure we have record level security enabled. I want to filter my data, no need to search, because I don't imagine that you're going to have too many recurring expenses inside this report. That's why I disabled the search form. However, if you have upwards of maybe 100 expenses, all listed on that recurring expense report, then it may be beneficial to enable the search form so you can find that expense quicker. But if you think about all the expenses you might have in a given month, you have your mortgage, you have your car payment, maybe a cell phone payment. It's not too many, right? We should be able to see them all visible inside that report without really needing to search. No need to filter data. Okay, we want to be able to list all the expenses. So we're not going to filter based on any one of our fields. We're going to hit continue. And now let's have the name field on the results page. Let's have the category. Let's have the cost, recurring, and the date field. Let's continue. And now what's very important here is because I want the end user to be able to edit the recurring expense report. So we're going to enable inline edit, right? We can also do inline delete, so we can delete that from the recurring expense report. And we also want inline insert, so we can quickly add the new expense from the very top of the report. So we're going to do an inline insert from the top, or you can change that to the bottom if you'd like. All right, so let's take a look at the results page here. We have the name, we have the category, we have the cost, we have the recurring field. This is going to be editable, so it's going to be a checkbox. That's completely fine. I don't think I need to make any additional changes here, with the exception of maybe for the checkbox, we can do a custom formatting where we do custom. Yes and no can be custom. So if it's yes, it can be active. If it's no, it can be inactive. Right? So if you're looking at your report you're looking at Netflix, it's easier to see active or inactive versus just yes or no. I think that's slightly more beneficial to the end user to be able to see. And now what's really nice is you can apply a specific color. So if it's yes, usually that's going to be green. That means it's active. If it's no, that's going to be inactive. We can do like an alert, like a red, and hit OK. Okay. And I think that is really all the modifications I need to make here. So we're going to continue here. Let's have 25 at a time. No need to sort. Let's continue. And no need for the details page. We're going to hit finish. Okay, so let's go ahead and deploy that recurring expenses report. Same as before, grab our embed code, back to Webflow, and let's go to our recurring page. Double click inside it, remove the previous one, paste a new one, save and close, and again, same as before, we want to publish. All right, let's take a look. There's my report. Obviously, I don't have anything now listed inside of recurring expenses, okay? One thing that I forgot to do is include my dropdown here in the category because I don't want to have to type the category myself. So let me go back to the data page so you can see how easy that is. Edit the recurring expense report. Navigate to the results page. Right over here, there's my category. Click on edit. And instead of that being a text field, I can make that a dropdown lookup table. And then we have a lookup table that lists all the categories. It's that simple. We hit finish. We reload the page, and now you're going to be able to see the categories. So let's add something to our recurring report. Okay, so let's do the cell phone payment. So we're going to say Verizon cell phone payment. Let's do bills and utilities. Maybe not the best category. For cost, that's going to be, I don't know, let's say $90 per month. I want that to be recurring, and I want to start that payment. Let's do today so that you can see how we copy that information over to the expenses table. So we're going to start that on the 18th, which means June 18th, July 18th, every time we hit 18 against 18, because we're doing that conditional in the task that we created earlier, it's going to copy over that cell phone payment automatically for you. You don't have to add it as a new expense manually. So we add that into it. I am not able to see my information, so let me go back to my data pages, click edit just to see why I'm not able to see that submission. We have the authentication applied. We have the user ID against the user ID. Okay, I remember what I did incorrectly. I finally remember what I did wrong. Actually, bit of a rookie mistake here, but what you have to do is you have to include the user ID in the results page as well. Because when you do an inline insert from the very top, we need to stamp the user's ID in the expenses table, the recurring expenses table, right? Because we need to have that information because we're doing record level security for users to be able to see their own expenses. So that's one item that I forgot. And then once you reach the results page, you need to go to editing, make that field hidden, and use the authentication field to grab the user ID. Okay, so let's test that out. Let's go back to the main page. Let's try to, let me just refresh one more time, and let's do one more submission here. So we can say gym membership. I don't have the category, maybe under entertainment. Let's say we're paying $29 a month. That's going to be recurring, and we're going to set that to today. Now when I add it, I should be able to see that listed. There we go, right? Because it's filtering using record level security for John Doe just to be able to see his own expenses. Now, one thing I am going to fix is because now in my expenses table for recurring, I have an empty user ID value. You're going to see in my table, if I go to my recurring expenses, right? I added this initially, but because I wasn't stamping the ID, it's not showing it now to my John Doe, which is my user ID. So I'm just going to manually copy this in my table and paste that up here. Okay. Actually, what I really like about the video, and this is all impromptu, off the cuff, I'm not going to edit anything. What I really like about it is that you can see how when you're developing something, you always run into some errors here and there, and you kind of have to go back and fix it. So it's inevitable. It's going to happen, right? So now on the front end, when I refresh, I should be able to see both of those payments because they belong to John Doe. Okay. We added both of these on the 18th. Now, when you go back to the dashboard page, you're not going to be able to see those newly added expenses, right? But wait a minute, 18 matches 18. Why is that information not inside my expenses table? The reason why is because the task is running at midnight daily. Okay, so I didn't catch that. Okay, so if I go back to my account and we go back to tasks, actually, let me just refresh this table here for expenses so that you can see. We don't see those newly added items inside the expenses table, but they are, however, inside the recurring expenses table. But you're probably wondering, but wait a minute, Ned, isn't that information now supposed to be copied over to my expenses table because the day matches? Again, as I just mentioned, if you look at the task, let's click edit, you'll see that it's running at midnight. So it obviously didn't catch that. But at midnight tonight, it's going to copy that information over back to the expenses table. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But what you could do to test this out, you can run that task now on demand. Okay, we just ran that task. All right, so if I go back to my expenses table, now you will be able to see that information added. Okay, now you see both the Verizon cell phone and the gym membership, which should also reflect back on my dashboard. We should be able to see that information. Okay, and it's right there. And it's also been added to my chart, and it's also been added to entertainment, which we see the gym membership, and bills and utilities, so we see Verizon cell phone bill. Pretty cool, right? You can now see, hopefully you're getting some ideas on what you can develop in Caspio based on all that I'm showing you here so far. We have our recurring, we have our dashboard, and now we need to create that report that allows me to filter based on 2 date fields, which also should be very simple to create. So let's see how we can do that. Okay, so back into my Caspio account. Let's go back to data pages. All right, new data page. Reports, let's do a combination of chart, tabular results page, and a search form. So if you recall earlier in my video, we looked at that 3D chart, the column chart. That's basically what we're creating now. So let's select that option. Let's hit next. For my source table, that's going to be the expenses table, obviously. Let's call this filter expenses. Style, again, I'm going to use gray. We're going to use English localization, and we're almost done with the video. We only have, I believe, 2 more data pages to create, and we'll be completely done. Restrict access. Let's make sure we have record level security enabled, and this time we want the ability to search the data. However, I want my results to appear underneath the search form, okay? And I want to display the results on the initial load. And what that means, when you load the browser, you're going to see the search form at the top, you're going to see the chart underneath, and then you're going to see your data all at once as soon as the browser loads. We hit next. All right, so what information do we want to be able to search on? Let's do the date field. Okay, I'm just going to copy what I had in my live example. We're going to do a date range, but you could also search based on category, based on name. It's completely up to you what fields you want to be able to search the data on. And now to create the date range, we're going to need to insert a new criteria. We set the logical operator to AND because we want criteria 1 and criteria 2. And for the first criteria, what I like to do is I like to leave the label date, and in parentheses, I like to say from. And then instead of equal, I want greater than or equal to. And then for criteria 2, I will say 2, so from and to. And this needs to be less than or equal to. So greater than or equal to, less than or equal to for that specific date. And that's in Caspio how you create a simple date range. Now, if I want these 2 date fields to be side by side, because at the moment they're going to be one on top of the other, but in the advanced tab, I can say continue next element on the same line, and that's going to put my 2 date fields side by side. I could also position my label on top of the field, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. We're going to hit next. Okay, so let's see here. In the results page, what information do we want to display? So let's have the category. Okay, let's have the name, cost, and date. Simple. We're going to hit next. Do we want the ability to edit the information from this results page? I think that we should, right? Because if you made a mistake in the past, and you want to be able to correct that mistake, let's say you added the expense for an incorrect date. We need to be able to fix that. So let's do an inline edit. That works for me. Or if you want to be able to delete an expense, you should also have that capability as well. Okay, and let's continue. Again, there's other options here as well. You can enable bulk edit. So if you want to be able to update multiple rows at the same time all at once, you can do that. You can also do bulk delete. So you're not deleting one item at a time, but we're not going to do that. Let's continue. And then on the results page, let's also group the data. enable grouping. You can group by category. Instead of grouping by category, let's group based on month. So we'll put the date field at the top, enable data grouping, date rollup. Let's do a month. Let's do a collapsible group, and let's have it be collapsed by default. Okay, so we're going to be able to see all of our data grouped by month in this case. Then we're going to have maybe a name. We're going to have category. We're going to have cost. Let's do the totals and aggregation. Same as before, based on the cost field. That's going to be sum. Let's format here as currency. No digits. But if you want to be more precise, you can include digits after the decimal. If you're counting cents, I'm not going to do that. Let's continue. Let's display 25 entries per page. Of course, you can change that to something else if you'd like. We're going to hit next. And now let's set up our 3D column chart. Okay, so we're going to do a 3D column chart. We're going to hit next. You can include your title if you'd like. I'm not going to do that. So let's plot the data using a series from data in a single field, right? Because I want to be able to have a series inside a column chart. In that column, I want to have different categories so that I can see for a specific month what I'm actually spending my money on. So we're going to select the top radio button. For the x-axis, we're going to have the date field. Again, we're going to roll up our data based on month so that we can see every single month how much we're spending inside the column chart. For series, we're going to use the category field. And then for value, we're going to use the cost, and we're going to do the sum. And let me see if I need to make any other modifications for the y-axis. Let's format this as a currency as well. That's also important. Hit next, and you can sort your data on the chart if you'd like. I'm not going to do that. Let's disable the details page and let's publish. So where is my data page? Right over here. Let's grab our embed code, copy it back into Webflow. Let's go to my reports. So that's the page called reports. And we're going to just click inside there and paste our new deploy code, save and close, publish, and let's see what that looks like. And we're almost done. We only have a very simple data page left for the user to update their profile, and we're going to build that in just a moment. Okay, so we're done. If all goes well, I should be able to now filter my data. So we have our date range. I can hit search. You can see our expenses, okay, broken down by month, and everything is in the month of May. Okay, once you have other months, you're going to be able to see those expenses adding up. Now, one thing that I'm going to fix is I was actually thinking I thought I built a stacked column chart, but I didn't do that because I want to stack my categories, okay, inside one column, but now they're separated. So let me go back to my data page here very quickly, hit edit, and navigate to my chart selection. So let's do a 3D stack column chart instead. And let me just see if I need to make any modifications here. No. Category, that's correct. And now it should be correct, right? The reason why I want to do that is if you have additional months, it's going to compress everything and it's not going to look as good. But now when I refresh, you're going to be able to see just one column and it breaks down all of your expenses by category inside that 3D column chart. So when the next month comes in, this is going to compress and you're going to have more space for other months to be listed. And the date range is going to work as expected, right? So all of these are in May. If I went back to the previous month, let's say we went back to April 1st to April 30th, okay, and I hit search, you're going to see nothing here because we don't have any expenses for the month of April. If you reset this, by the way, in Caspio, you can do some really cool dynamic things where you can include a reset button, right? So when you click on it, it just clears the fields and does the search again automatically for you. But we're not doing anything complicated today. We're just going to do something simple where you can see how even if you manually remove that information, it clears everything and it brings back your data. Down below, we're grouping everything by month. So these are all of my expenses for May, and you can collapse and expand that. All right, we have one final data page left to build, which is the profile. So back in Webflow, I will just simply change this to profile. All right, we're going to click inside that. We're going to remove that deploy code. Let's go back to Caspio and build that last and final data page. update data page. It's under forms. We're going to hit next. User table. Let's call this update form. Style is going to be, again, I'm going to use the same style gray, localization English, restrict access, hit next. And now we need to make sure that the user sees their own data when they log in for the profile page, right? So this user ID to user ID needs to be set up correctly. We're going to hit next. And now it's up to you what information you want the end user to have the ability to edit. I'm going to include the first name field and last name field, and I'm just going to display that information. I don't want them to be able to change their name, but I want them to be able to see it. The email field, password field, date registered, and this you definitely don't want to show them the checkbox because only an admin level user should have the ability to make that account active or inactive, right? So we're going to include these fields. We're going to hit next. So let's just fix this a little bit. We're going to have first name. That's going to be display only. Last name, display only. Email. Do I want them to have the ability to change their email? Again, this is your call. You can have it be a text field. So if they do have a different email address, they can change that. Personally, I will keep that as a display only. And if they do change the email, they have to contact me directly, and then I can change it on their behalf. For password, yeah, let's give them the ability to change their password. However, I want them to require current password validation. So they have to enter in their current password, and then they're going to be able to change their password to something else if they want to. And then date register, we can keep this at the very top as display only. Simple. We hit finish. We grab that final deploy code, copy, back into Webflow, paste, save and close, publish. Let Webflow do its thing. All right. Profile, and there's my profile form. And we are completely done. Okay, we have our whole entire application developed in, I don't know how long. I'm not really sure how long the video is. Maybe it's an hour, maybe an hour and a half. If we didn't run into those couple of issues with the redirect on the dashboard, remember how I had to remove the space? I mean, that ate about 2 or 3 minutes of our time. But I'm happy that it happened because you can see how when you're building and developing applications, it's inevitable you're going to run into these troubleshooting issues, but you have to go back and forth and kind of fix either on the Webflow side or fix it back on the Caspio side. Okay. But hopefully you can see how easy it was to build that application in Caspio. We didn't use any coding other than that redirect script that we used at the very beginning, but everything else was just simply point and click. You are able to build out these interfaces, deploy them to your website, and you're good to go. Now, I'm not going to get into it, but I will explain the reason why Caspio is so powerful is under tables, we didn't create any, but every single table that you create, you can do triggered actions, similar to what we did in the task down here, but you can do triggered actions on the table level, which allows you to do some really complex and fancy things in the back end behind the scenes to enable these automatic procedures. Typically, let's say you can do it if you have a history log table to copy the data over to the history log table for audit trail. You can do inventory type setups where if you have an e-commerce solution on the front end, somebody placed the order for something, you can take that quantity and you can subtract it from your inventory. Okay. And in addition to that, you could have a checkbox to put the item on back order if your inventory, let's say, falls below 20% threshold. You can combine that with sending an email or sending an SMS to notify the admin, hey, your inventory is low, add more item so that people can buy that item. And this is what makes Caspio so powerful, is to be able to do triggers, is to be able to do task, which is event-based. And in addition to that, what we allow you to do is in any data page that you create, once you get to the configuration screen, you can insert either HTML blocks or a header and footer. And here you can insert JavaScript or HTML and CSS if you'd like. And not only that, you can also insert SQL statements if you really want to take advantage of the back end to be able to pull data from the table to display that data on the front end. So you can insert JS, you can insert HTML, CSS, SQL statements to make your applications even more robust and sophisticated. And that, to me, if you are Even a business user or a citizen developer, you don't need to use those industry standard languages. You can build everything using standard features like we did today. But if you are a developer, if you have that background, well, you can remove any limitation when it comes to imagination because you can really develop some fancy and dynamic workflows using JS or any of these languages that you can extend your application with. I will just mention one final thing about Caspio. Let me cancel out of that. Under access permissions, in addition to being able to have unlimited application users on the front end, so if I logged out, I can register as somebody else, and that's your second application user besides just John Doe. 3, 4, or 5, you can have as many application users registering as you want. But what I wanted to say is you can also have unlimited number of developers inside your Caspio account. So that's a huge benefit as well, because if you're looking to collaborate, if you want to give your colleague or if you have an IT team access to your account, you can simply invite a user. Say we go with John Smith at AOL.com. You can have a predefined group with its own set of permissions. I will just place him in this group called Everyone. I hit invite. John has to check his email. When he checks his email, he can accept my invite and he's going to be an active user of my account. Now here's the beauty. I can click on permissions for John Smith. And now I have full control what John is going to have access inside my account. So if I only want John to have access to this application that we built today, I can give him full control over that application and hit OK. In addition to applications, you can also give him access to specific objects inside the account, including tables. So if I select a specific table, I can give him full control. These are the group's permissions, but you can supersede those permissions by clicking on the checkboxes on the left. Okay, so you can really get down to a granular level in terms of permissions to what these people can do inside your own account. So if I leave it as is, let's say I just give John Smith access to this application, I hit OK. When John logs into my account, the only application he's going to be able to see is one My Expenses. That's it. And he won't be able to see all of the other applications. Okay? There's so much more to the Caspio platform. There's no possible way for me to show you everything in terms of relationships, editing, dynamic pop-up windows with modal if you'd like. You can also do that on the Webflow side. But there are lots and lots of customizations. If I were to show you this application that we developed today that looks much nicer, I could. So if I bring up my bookmark here, I will show you. If we go to App Examples, Financial, here I am logged in. You can make it look like that, especially if you have the knowledge of Bootstrap, downloading your own template. Here are Caspio data pages that we built today. We can go to Add Expense. So here's a modal pop-up. Okay. In the other example, if you recall, let me just go to that, what we created today. So if I go to Dashboard, I created this Add Expense button. When you click on it, it takes me to a form. But if you wanted to do something a little bit more dynamic, you could have that same button open up a pop-up window where you have a Caspio form, and upon submission, you're able to see that submission here in the dashboard. We have our recurring payments. Same exact thing. We have the reports. Okay, I don't have a 3D chart here, but it's the same thing, just 2D. And then we have the profile page, right? Same exact application. Okay, exactly the same application. It just looks nicer because I spent a little bit more time working on the layout, customizing the aesthetics, and everything else behind the scenes. Okay. All right, so what you do with Caspio is completely up to you, what kind of application you want to create. Just remember, everything starts on the table level. So if you're building a healthcare application, obviously your tables are going to have to contain healthcare fields. If you're building a project application, your tables will need to contain project-related fields. Build out your tables first, create your relationships, set up your authentications, and then start working on all of your interfaces. And in the end, you can, if you choose to go with Webflow, you can. That's my recommendation. Webflow is a very simple and intuitive UI that allows you to build a website in just a couple of hours, and then you can simply just embed and deploy all of your data pages into Webflow. All right. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that it was informative. And I look forward to seeing what you guys are going to develop. If you'd like to join me on our live stream on Mondays, I host our live stream on our YouTube channel. Just look for Caspio Inc. That is our YouTube channel account ID. And on Mondays at 10 a.m. California time, I do live streams. You guys can join those if you'd like to learn more about Caspio and how we use the platform. If you do swing by, say hello. Let me know that you came in from the Webflow video that I did. And I look forward to teaching you how to use Caspio. And then we also learn a little bit about HTML and CSS and how we go about building different types of applications inside the Caspio platform. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Have a good day. And I hope to see you in the live stream. Take care. Bye-bye.